All right, something non-controversial. Why am I obsessed with Jews? So I've always been obsessed with Jews since I went to Israel at 15 with some secretly Jewish friends who took me there. I've done multiple trauma, psychology, and peace workshops in Israel and surrounding areas. Many of my mentors are Jewish. There's a sort of shared trauma with the Irish, a lot of Jews in trauma work. I'm obsessed with Jews. I haven't got the definite article pass. They don't let me say the Jew. That's the line. Apparently, you can't cross the definite article. But I'm obsessed with Jewish people. But it seems like the world is. The right is obsessed with Jewish people again. I'm like, hasn't that what happened there? And the left is now obsessed with Jewish people. And everybody else isn't. I mean, I'm not obsessed with Albanians or Welsh people. There's 5 million Welsh people. They're in a small country. Like they're pretty equivalent to Israel in many ways. I'm not constantly thinking about why am I obsessed with Jews, Jonathan?
I have to admit, I didn't think we were going to go there, but I'm fine. I'll talk about anything. That's
Listen,
totally
I'm
fine.
already cancelled. There's nothing they
Yeah,
can do
yeah.
now. It's like Mel Gibson.
Okay, so there is a very deep relationship in the West, between Christians and Jews. It's there from the very beginning. You know, the story of the relationship between Christians and Jews is the craziest story in the world. It's actually, people don't realize how crazy this relationship is. That is, think about it this way. I can tell it in 5 minutes and you'll see how crazy it is. So, in Israel, during the time where the Romans have taken your nation, right? So the Romans are in charge. The Romans are brutally kind of holding down the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation are pretty rebellious. They're rowdy. They cause a lot of trouble. The Romans are annoyed with them, and so there's this massive tension. This Messiah appears, and this he's kind of a rabble rouser. He says wild things, things that the religious authorities don't like, but that they're also afraid of because they don't want the Romans to clamp down. So they kill him. And then people start to follow him, start to convert, and people outside start to convert, and they persecute those people. The Jewish authorities persecute those people that convert. And then the Romans start persecuting them. Who would have thought? The Romans accuse them of having burned down part of Rome, and they start to like massively persecute them. Then the Romans destroy Jerusalem, burn it down, the whole thing. No more temple, no more nothing. The biggest destruction that Israel has ever dealt with, since the exile of Babylon or whatever. And so you have this weird situation. And so the Jews are spread out during the Roman Empire. The Christians are there. They're being persecuted. And then the weirdest thing in the world happens, which is the Romans start to follow that Messiah that they killed before the destruction of Jerusalem. And then everything flips. All of a sudden, those Christians that were persecuted for centuries are now in power. And they're the same power that destroyed the temple. Now think about that. That is wild. That is the
If you
wildest.
replace Jews with Welsh, and I think it sounds even more wild. Like if you were to tell that story and say, okay, there's this group of people called the Welsh, right? And they were occupied by the Romans, and then like God was born into the Welsh. So God was kind of Welsh, but then the Welsh kind of killed God. So the Welsh are also responsible for that. And then the Welsh had like the money because they weren't allowed to own land. Like that, you'd see how wild it was, right? If
Yeah.
you just used another
You use different terms.
placeholder.
So you now you have this weird relationship, which is that as the Christianity grows in the Roman Empire, they eliminate all the cults. So now there are no more of the pagan cults. No other religion is allowed in Europe except one, which is Judaism. Why? And so the Christians preserve the Jews in Europe. They let them exist as Jews, and they're the only ones. No one else is allowed to continue to exist. And it's a very weird, tenuous relationship. And so the Jews become the outsiders
The
in with
other,
us.
right? The symbolic other.
Yeah, they become the official other. They become the remnant of an old world. They become like a residue of the old world that is still among us and is in some ways acts as a margin in every way. So the Jews act as margins in every single way. They, you know, they have all of these kind of flexible positions. They don't own land. They have all of these roles that are really the role of the margin. And so when it goes well, it's beautiful and it's wonderful. It's because you need that. You actually need,
Innovative scientists,
yeah, you
comedians,
need
that's all the
otherness
edge,
in
right?
you because,
Yeah.
or else you become completely hermetic and you close off. So when it goes well, it's beautiful. And then when it doesn't go well, then it's kind of horrible. Um, because on the one hand, you have this problem, which is now you have someone with other intentions inside you. So you have people that have other allegiances that are part of you. And so when things start to go wrong, they're suspicious of them. And then sometimes maybe they also care more about themselves than you. And so that's a problem too. And so they have this problem that sets itself up. So we have a long story. I mean, it's like 1,500 years, of relationship, which means that the idea that the Jews are just like the Albanians is just ridiculous. They are completely integral to our identity as the West. They play this role in the Western story. And so, and then one of the things that happened is that for 2,000 years, they didn't have a nation. They were basically this free floating, strangers that would function through the system and that would kind of create the connections. They were like connectors, right? So they did trade, they did all of this stuff. And then after World War II, then they get a nation. And so now what does that mean? And that's why people are obsessed with Jews. It's related
Right,
to the
right.
World War II consensus. Is that on the one hand, Israel is the ultimate like left-wing fantasy because these dispossessed people that have been marginalized for thousands
The
of
most
years
persecuted, one of the most.
finally have their home, right? And so it's a left-wing fantasy. But then it's also like a right-wing fantasy
Right.
because they're an ethno state, dude. We don't have ethno states. We're not allowed an
Military
ethno state.
service, tough borders.
Yeah,
They've got a wall. Yeah, they're sort of right wing. They're like for the right wing people often complain, you get what we want,
that's
right?
right.
And the birth rates are sky high, highest birth rates in the developed world, even amongst the non-religious Israelis. So
So
there's
that's
some
it.
sense of
That's what's
meaning and
going on.
purpose there, right? This, like my friend who lives there says, we still have a purpose. Like we have a goal, we have a reason to be, and the even being surrounded by enemies gives that existential feeling of a like when I used to like working as well. I haven't for a while, but the reason I used to like it was it was exciting. Like there's a feeling of aliveness there. There's a feeling of meaning. There's a feeling of
Mhm.
us. It's like I'm sometimes in sort of it's kind of like you can be welcomed inside this strong other, you know, and there's a feeling that's different than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that
that's
makes
what. So
sense.
that's why everybody. You can. It is now when we talk about the end of the World War II consensus. That is part of it, which is Israel is the World War II consensus for all intents and purposes. It has everything in it. But then, as the story plays out, some of the side effects of that world start to manifest themselves, uh, which is that because of the Allies' thinking, we're not allowed nations, we're not allowed ethne, we're not allowed identity, and then because of uh and so the those that were rejected are allowed nation and are given nation, but then they start to act like a nation. So when they start to act like a nation, then the left wing people freak out because they're like, oh no, you're acting like a nation, you're fascist. And it's
Yeah,
like this weird, like total invert. It really is
it's
like an
all
upside
there.
down world.
Well, it seems like there's a battle for the different inversions, right? So in psychological terms, this thing, the victim triangle of the victim, the persecutor, the rescuer. It seems like people are really fighting for those positions now.
Yeah,
Like they were relatively established for what you're the victim, you're not.
that's
You
right.
guys, the white guys, are the persecutors. But now it's like, okay, as a white young British guy, you have lower educational achievement, you get discriminated against by the civil service and the police and what have you. So now there's this battle for the positions
Yeah.
in this victim triangle.
Yeah, and we really have to, what has to collapse is that thing, this idea of the absolute victim and the absolute oppressor, which is at the core of the World War II narrative. That has to fall. If it doesn't fall, we are in serious trouble because it's going to get really, really nasty if that doesn't fall. In the medieval world, the Crusades, for example, there was this idea that your enemy was honorable. Right, this idea that although we're there and we're fighting the Muslims, Saladin is the most noble enemy, and this idea that in some ways you were able to even though you had to be in a position and you had to have to fight, you could understand the position of your enemy, and you could be careful. Like when you read the Iliad, the Trojans are noble. You
Right.
understand their position, you understand their story. It's not just like the good guys and the bad guys and like the oppressor and the victim.
It's
And
not
we
black and
have to
white.
if we have to break that so we can understand that sometimes the West is an oppressor and sometimes it isn't, and
Right.
sometimes Israel is an oppressor and sometimes it isn't, and we have to be able to see through this cloud to understand a more subtle version of reality, or else we are screwed. Like it's
There's
going to get nasty if we don't get to that.
Jonathan, I heard a member of the Canadian curling team swearing at the Swedish guy just a few days ago. I thought, this is it. We've crossed the Rubicon. This is the line. Even the
If
Canadian
the
hurling team
Canadians are
see the Swedes as the enemy. This is it. We're doomed now. This is the last card has fallen.